dialogue that takes place with your GPS, your satellite navigation system. It's a dialogue. Because those of you who have got one know that it is a dialogue, is it not? Because the woman, or the man, or whoever you programmed it to be, says to you, drive 3 miles and turn left. But you know that's stupid, because you know where you're going to end up if you turn left. You know that the better way is actually to turn right and go round the back. So you tell her to shut up. Or worse. I have only my own data to rely on here, which is not the best source of information, but certainly the dialogue that I have with my sat-nav lady is not actually repeatable. And then she says things that are linguistically interesting. Drive 3 miles and turn left. Drive 2 miles and turn left. Drive 1 mile and turn left. Can't say that. I just said drive 1 mile and turn left. Can't say that. Don't you know the basic rule of oh, yes. And of course you get it on the screen too, you know, 1 files with the S in brackets, of course. Things are improving. The latest sat-nav I've got doesn't say, it says drive 1 mile, if she has finally learned her English grammar in that respect. But that's why we have the term electronically mediated, because it's broader than the notion of computer-mediated communication. And bear in mind that mobile telephony is the future in this respect. I was at a conference in Florida last year, run by the mobile telephony organizations, and they are predicting that by, well, that was last year, by 2020, this year they're saying by 2015, 80% of all interaction with the internet will be through a mobile phone, not through your computer terminal anymore. Some of us will still have the old-fashioned computers where we are plonked in a particular place and we have to sit there in order to get things off the internet. But most of us, apparently, according to them, and the trend is certainly going in that direction, will be using mobile in order to do it. So, it's all very recent. It is so recent, isn't it? Extraordinarily recent. 2011, think back 20 years to March 1991. No World Wide Web yet. That came later in 1991. When did you first send an email, those of you who are old enough, as it were, to have sent an email in the 1990s period? In the universities, of course, emails have been going for 20, 30 years, back to the 1970s, in fact. But for most people, they didn't start sending emails until the mid-1990s. When did you first enter a chat room, if you did, ever? Again, you wouldn't have done that, although it was theoretically possible, and some people did. But for most people, at the mid-1990s, once again. When did you first do a search on Google? Well, you couldn't have done that before 1999. That's when Google turned up. When did you first send a blog, if you did, write a blog, or read one? Well, the term blog itself, weblog, 1997 invented. But nobody sent blogs or wrote them really until about 2002, 2003, when Blogger and the other easy-to-use software came along. Instant messaging, early 2000s. Text messaging, around about 2000 once again. Facebook, 2004. YouTube, 2004, 2005. Twitter, 2006. We are talking very recent stuff here. And 20 years is an eye blink when it comes to language change, as we know. So in order to study the language of the internet, we do need large quantities of data in order to get a hook onto what's going on. And keep updating and updating and updating, because it's all moving so fast. A little book I wrote in 2001 called Language and the Internet, 2001, 10 years ago. It talks about the web and email and chat rooms and virtual worlds. It doesn't talk about instant messaging, and it doesn't talk about blogging, because neither of those were around really in 2000 when I was writing the book. So the second edition came out in 2006. New edition. Instant messaging in, blogging in, Facebook? No. Hadn't heard of Facebook in 2005. You know, it had been around for a few months, but nobody was expecting it to be a success. And so, you know, you think, oh, let's do another edition. because it's just ridiculous. If I write one this year, it's going to be different next year. It'll be out of date before it's published. We take Twitter as an example. Twitter arrives in 2006. And you think, okay, I'll get a huge corpus of data from Twitter in 2007 or 2008. You'd have been a fool to do that. Because a year last November, at the end of 2009, Twitter changes its prompt. Whereas the original prompt for Twitter was, what are you doing? People responded in that way and said, I am stuck in a lift. Remember Stephen Fry's famous experience? Or I am eating cornflakes, or whatever it might be, thinking that the entire world of the internet is just waiting to hear your tweet in this respect. November 2009, Twitter changes its prompt, and the prompt now on Twitter is what's happening. Now there's a huge difference between what are you doing and what's happening. What are you doing is inward looking. I am doing something. What's happening is outward looking. What is going on out there? And as a result, the content of Twitter dramatically changed last year, and the linguistic character of Twitter as well. So any generalization you made about Twitter between 2006 and 2009 was immediately, as it were, a period of historical linguistics, and is no longer relevant to what Twitter is like right now. And so it's very difficult keeping up to date with all this sort of thing. Mind you, that doesn't stop people generalizing falsely about the internet, or about any of the electronic media we've been talking about. And this is the real problem, isn't it? If you've done some research into this area, you know one of the first things you've got to do is get rid of the mythology that's out there about what people think the internet is all about. And one of the best examples is that text messaging example that I was talking about a few seconds ago. Texting comes along. There have been very few large-scale studies of texting, hardly any, in fact. As I told you, it's difficult to get hold of the data. Hasn't stopped people generalizing about it, and in a very negative kind of way. A huge mythology has built up about text messaging, as you all know, because virtually every one of you here will have had the following arguments put to you at some point by Uncle John and your parents, or some other well-meaning but completely uninformed adult. And sometimes one's colleagues, too, of the same peer group, are sometimes just as negative if they don't understand what's going on. And it goes like this, doesn't it? Text messaging, ridiculous. What are you not doing these days, you young people of today? You're filling your text messages with these abbreviations, these newfangled abbreviations that you've cooked up. And why have you cooked them up? In order to stop us respectable adults understanding what you're saying. It's all a great plot, a conspiracy, a teenage conspiracy probably. Disgusting the way you're leaving out letters randomly all over the place. Nobody can understand what's going on. What's happened to standard English? The standard English I used in my day, that's what I want to know. Newfangled things you're inventing all the time. Yes, so leaving letters out shows you don't know how to spell. None of you know how to spell, otherwise you wouldn't leave those letters out in the first place. And moreover, it's a fact that you're putting these abbreviations into your university essays and in school, into your school homework essays. And it's a fact that you're putting them into your examination results, answers, so that you're going to get marked down, you're going to fail your examinations. I have it as a fact that examiners are complaining all over the country about, all over the world indeed, in all languages, about the fact that these abbreviations are turning up in their exam results. And you're all going to get marked down, you're all going to fail, and you're all going to grow up into adults who won't know how to spell, and the English language is going to go down the drain, and French language, and German language, all languages. It's all your fault. I only slightly exaggerate. In fact, I don't think I exaggerate at all when you remember that somebody like John Humphreys, whom God preserve, because few others will, says that text messages are vandals, doing harm to the English language in exactly the same way as the Vandals destroyed Europe 1500 years ago. The reality, of course, is quite the opposite. Every